to give us a talk / interactive discussion about what you've been working on in terms of brain science.
John, I'm sorry. Can you tell me about how long you guys want me to?
20.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I would love to start with a little interactive activity, and then we can talk more about what we're doing as a school. But this activity can be done with some partners. I have 5 sets, so it seems like we need 3 or 4 people in each group. But I'm going to tell you the rules because it is actually more fun if you follow rules. And not everyone does. So on the side, these are 2-sided. I'll put them down on the side you should keep them on, if that makes sense. Don't flip them over yet. These are statements that come from a set of statements that were produced by the Center for Transitional Teaching and Learning, which is housed at St. Andrew's Episcopal School in Potomac, Maryland, and we are founding partners with them for that center. We're among about 30 original partners in that work. This is our 4th year with them, and their institute is 4 years old. Makes sense. This was originally produced as a deck of cards meant for educators, and I have taken, and I use them all the time at school, I've taken those statements and rewritten them slightly, so from the point of view of a parent. So I've used these a couple of times. I don't think, as I look around the room, I don't think anyone's been at a PIF that I've done with these. But I've used them a few times for that, so that's been fun. So these are statements that have either there's some scientific evidence that these are true, or that they're false, or there's no definitive proof at this time whether the statement is true or false. And you will recognize something. You'll read some things and say, "Oh, I've heard that," or "Yes, I believe that's true," or "No, I believe that's not true." Some of them will be familiar to you. So I have, along with these statements, 3 little faces. If you believe that research supports the statement, you can file it under a smiley face. So you can make 3 columns if you want. If you believe that research does not support this statement, sad face. And if you believe that the research is not definitive at this time, just whatever that face is. Straight face. Undecided face. Does that make sense? So 3 columns. Don't turn them over until you've categorized everything. When I tell you to, you can turn them over and look and say, "Oh, that's interesting. I thought that was true. It's not," or "I thought that there was no evidence, but there is," or whatever. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So don't cheat. So I'll let you get into small groups if you will. I think there's room at the tables. Don't overanalyze. I mean, it's just meant to be a quick.
So we look at all of these. It's just the 3 of us.
It seems like we need 3 or 4 per group.
Okay.
Okay.
This 4, I guess. Okay. You guys joined up already?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That seems.
Remember what you're trying to discern is, does research support the statement or not, or we don't know yet.
As for some kids and for some it isn't. So maybe the research would show that I don't know emotions. For some for all your visual
No, I would think it would just make you even stronger.
I don't know. Because for some kids it would.
So yes.
I guess yes.
So we're wrong then.
Last time was too bad we can use for tests. Student
the middle researchers.
See, I wonder if that's the researchers might some people might it's different.
Right.
Well, I think
It doesn't say it's good for everyone,
But
it just says that they should have closer relationships. No, I mean,
if you do it after class to go over your notes.
Okay, so let's just take it as a great way to prepare.
It might be this, but maybe they don't know.
Well, again,
I think that's good.
I would say yes, but I don't know if there's any.
I have no idea.
An older, like.
It was before the- yeah.
It was a parent.
And obviously, we don't use that.
Yes, but I'm not
I can't say that that's a step. And they're doing
I feel like I heard that
They could be no research. But I thought that it was supposed to be true.
I've heard similar. But is it, but they would know that. It's not whether or not this is true. It's all students doing research.
This one I just don't know.
Your muscles don't know things like that.
But I thought that was true.
They would know that
I think we should.
Students maybe not. See, that age, they only want to spend.
Students learn better.
I'd say modality.
Now, I think there's research.
It's supposed to be, I think it's based on only because when you find it, this is what feels that person over there. If it's not you, we're a team. Until the real one.
I think that's more recent.
We shouldn't say there are some things.
How we were talking.
Yeah, I would say like that's involvement, but I think it could be,
It's so different than it can't be all y'all in the same house. You know what I mean? Right. And then I think I'm getting part of
you're doing it as a support team, but this is I would say I'm
Unfortunately, but not only, I mean, it's not, it depends on this is a combination of.
but I don't know if it's
different from the other one, right? Like, well, on that,
yeah, because that is how you progress. I mean, in other words, if only your top base, then that's implemented. So really, we think only it's good to have things.
But that one is really not.
So that's true. That is a good use of
Based on the content that we're teaching in that moment, rather than saying, okay, you guys are kind of separate, so I want you to draw while doing math facts. I want you guys to draw pictures of the math facts. But based on whatever it is they're trying to teach on the content, then you say, we need this to be best attained by all students doing a kind of setting activity. But you absolutely should.
Or like emotional research, but I don't think that
False for most people.
Because handwriting is crazy. There's a huge.
Are they all false?
Every all of these. Right.
Yeah, good. Okay, so that's true. Well, that is required testing. Testing is a great way.
At the end of the summer, they gave it the physics exam in June. Kids earned, back in August.
This is the less brain and light range.
So they haven't written.
I mean, that makes sense, that's a memory.
Right.
Oh, that's the one that hit in the middle.
There's nothing that's left right
Brain is
brain
not
is
all
really defining the difference between achievement and
transaction costs.
because they achieved a grade.
I'm left right, I'm right. I do.
And a lot of teachers, a lot of information are.
Oh, we hit it in the middle.
Because they were good students.
Oh, yeah, regardless. It's clear.
Yes, it was.
Effort should be praised rather than
That's why I'm a
achieved.
teacher, because I feel like I so he would not consider himself
Having knowledge of
Success is
robust and stored long-term memory, students will
But
engage.
You'll need 10%
a
of
lot
my.
of us. There's teachers because we
All the time, even when doing nothing. Sorted is great.
So,
I'm not good for sorting.
right,
Right,
it's a strong.
students learn better if the teaching methods matches.
I mean, some of them. There are, you
Oh,
know, being on the teacher.
I'm blown away.
Okay, same one.
Surprised you that you, I can't claim to know all of the answers, although I've done a lot of work around this. But I'm happy to try to talk about any of these. If there's one or two that were particularly surprising. All right, so one surprising one for this group was the statement, some people are kinesthetic learners, some are auditory learners, and some are visual learners. That's something we've heard maybe not all our lives, but in the relatively recent past, that has been working theory. So the new research, the new science behind that statement is that we all learn always, and that we may have preferences, but it doesn't mean that we cannot learn other ways, and that as an educator, what I should be doing is choosing the ways to present things based on the content that I'm teaching in that moment. So that some things are best taught, that's probably an extreme word, visually, and some kinesthetically, and some in an auditory way. But it's really important for me as a teacher to make sure that I'm mixing it up, that I don't fall back on my own preferences and think that, everyone wants to be a 6th grade math student running around the room and spouting math facts or something. That there may be times when we, based on the content, that we should be up and moving, and other times when we should be visually representing the concept, and other times where we should be, and actually in a 6th grade math class, relatively rarely, where we just really should be focusing on listening only, So that one's an interesting one, because we certainly all, and I think we think of ourselves as one way, because we feel like we embraced that when it came out. That makes sense. I'm definitely visual, or whatever. Any others pop out? Yeah.
I was just thinking, so we got the one where rereading for preparing for tests is
not the right way to do it. Like, so how should one self-test?
So, lots of ways, and you can make up new questions, you can take your notes and you do need to read them again, but then be more, the point is to be more active. That just looking at your notes is not an active learning strategy. So actively engaging with your notes. So self-testing is related to that, obviously, because you can be coming up with new questions. You can teach someone else. That's not quite self-testing, although it is, because if you can explain the concepts, then you have it. You probably have, even non-educators, seen some articles or research about that when you teach someone else, you retain 90% of the material. So, you know, I don't use myself all the time, but one of the ways, I just teach one class, and it happens this year to be 6th grade math, last year 7th grade, sometimes it's upper school, I sort of fill a hole, often 5th grade, although not in a few years. Often my homework is to teach someone else what we're doing, someone older than you. So I say to them, it can be an extended day counselor, it can be your next door neighbor, it can be your older brother, it can be your mom, you know, whoever can take a few minutes. And because I tend to teach, you know, 5th, 6th, 7th graders, for about a month I can get away with they'll say, well, we should have like a worksheet. And I'll say, oh, well, I happen to have this. And then they'll say, we should make an answer key. I say, well, I do have extra. I made a mistake and ran off extra. So then they, you know, do the work and teach someone. But by about the beginning of November, they're usually on to me for that, like, yeah. But they do, they like that, and I do think it's helpful to them. Yeah. What
I
else?
had one, we only use 10% of our brains as being false, because I have heard repeatedly that we don't maximize the use of our brains.
Right.
And so I was very surprised by that.
So some of this research comes from, a lot of the research on learning in the brain comes from functional MRIs. And you know, functional MRIs, some of the early learning about the brain, and some of the early learning about learning in the brain happened out of Yale with a woman named Sally Shavitz, who was using functional MRIs to try to discern what parts of the brain were most active with children with a language-based learning difference like dyslexia, although there are others, and children who did not have a language-based learning difference, and was seeing different parts of the brain light up more intensely. And from that research then developed very specific targeted ways of teaching children with language-based learning differences. But the whole brain does light up. It's just that, so your whole brain is working all the time, but there are parts of the brain, depending on the task, that are more lit up, I guess, if you will. If we
So
were
it's
to
kind of
use
a misnomer that we
Yes,
have all that
yeah.
space in there.
That
It's not
that we're
really
not
used for
right.
anything.
Right. It is. Stuff is happening.
Well, that's kind of the way I operate. I walk through life assuming that most of my head is empty. It's a good excuse. That makes me feel so much better.
Or worse, like I thought I was only
Or
using
worse,
10%.
this is full capacity.
The reason I
This is
can't
all I
write the reason I couldn't do that is because I'm really only using 10%. If I was using all of it, I could do that.
I say that all the time
Can't
to
say
my
that
kids.
anymore.
My brain cells are dead. I lost my brain cells.
Nobody asked me about multitasking. That one usually comes up. Was that surprising, or have you now heard some of that research that we don't really
My
multitask?
sister's a principal and educator, and she told me that no one can really multitask.
Right. We task switch all the time, but that is different from multitasking. So I might feel like I'm multitasking because I'm making a list of the things I want to get done today, and I answered the phone, but my brain did switch when I picked up the phone, and people who claim to be excellent at multitasking really are switching from task to task. And something is lost when you switch, every time you switch. So staying more focused on something for a little longer means you will be more efficient. That said, there's also learning about what's called interleaving in education ease, which is that you should come back to things, like you should work on something and then put it aside and then come back to it. And you know, some musicians have known that forever, right? That if you practice, I don't know, 30 minutes a day, that's way better than getting to the day before your piano lesson and practicing for 2 hours, right? So, you know, that is a real life example that we probably all sort of know, but we don't necessarily live it in other ways of learning. And
That's a lot like that whole spiral of learning, right?
yes, correct, right, yes. Yeah, interleaving is basically spiralizing. So that's another interesting thing about all of this relatively new research on learning in the brain, which is that a lot of it's affirming, which is a great thing, you know, for me and my job as director of academics, because I can stand up in front of teachers and say, you know, when you read this book that I want you all to read over the summer, you will read a lot that is very affirming to your practice, and you'll also learn some new things about things that you have assumed or done all along, that and with small tweaks. But a lot is affirming. We know, you know, and some of that is because we are, you know, teachers are naturally, but especially at the school, reflective about our practice. So whether that's in a formal way where we meet and talk about how did that go, you know, if we're team teaching something or part of a teaching team or a grade level team. And some of it is just what teachers, many of us, I mean, not just teachers, do naturally. Driving home, you're like, well, boy, I thought that thing was gonna work with those 6th graders. But it really didn't, so here's what I'm gonna do tomorrow. You know, I'm doing a bit of active research, really, in my head. It's not formalized when I'm doing that as I drive home, but I am reflecting on here's what I'm gonna do tomorrow because that thing didn't work. And over time, hopefully, you know, practice is improving. And the nice thing is that a lot of that is affirmed through brain research. Because a lot of this is from functional MRI work, it's a relatively new field still. So it changes constantly. I've read some things, I don't know if this is really true, but that if, you know, if you're reading research about the brain and learning that's more than 6 months old, you might as well throw it away. I'm not sure that's exactly true anymore, but it is a statement about how quickly this field is growing and the knowledge we have. I know I'm probably coming up on my time. I do have some handouts, but I did want to tell you a couple of things, just so you know. And I'm, you know, if time permits, I'm happy to come back and we can talk more, or just in whatever way best. So I told you we were partners with the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning, and they're an excellent resource. We have we are also partnering with the Science of Learning Institute at Hopkins and beginning a partnership with the School of Education at Hopkins. So we have teachers working with people in those to do some action research, and which does not mean we are testing things on your children in ways that might be frightening. It is more about let's teach this lesson this way, and let's teach this lesson this way, and then collect some data. And you know, it's not about let's have half the class do these things that we know aren't supported by brain research, and we're not doing that, I promise. But it's, you know, we're using the research that we have about ourselves also as on ourselves as educators. The entire school has read the book NeuroTeach, which I highly recommend. It is written by 2 people from the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning at St. Andrews. And the whole school read it 2 summers ago, or the whole faculty read it 2 summers ago, and I've now had So every summer, I have our new faculty read it so that everyone is up to speed, and then we can use that. On our Plus Day sessions, the Brain-Based Learning Task Force always presents, and we always have a crowd of teachers, and we present different strategies, and sometimes we watch a webinar and then have discussions about it. It just depends. We talk about what is appealing to us in that moment, and figure that out. I talked a little bit about action research, and a lot of you know that we use a design thinking approach a lot as a problem-solving strategy, both with our students and as the adults, and I think that is well supported. Those strategies are well supported by action research. It's almost one and the same, and also by the fact that we're a Quaker school, that we are willing to continually evolve, and that we use reflection in order to improve our practice. In the last 3 years, 28 faculty have attended the academy at the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning, which is a 5-day academy. I send about 10 a year, so pretty quickly we have a critical mass of people who have also, in addition to doing this reading and the in-house things we do, have also had this intensive experience. And the different groups of us, learning specialists and I, the teaching and learning committee, and the brain-based learning committee, have in the last 3 years taken one of our professional days, this most recently in November, and presented around these topics. So we're really working hard to infuse, to validate people's practices, and affirming what they already do and know so well, but also move people forward in the new research.
That's wonderful. Do you, question,
Yeah.
do you have any plans to share any of this with a larger parent population? I feel like it's something that parents would be interested in, and
I am
also
happy
it would
to.
be helpful to have parents kind of
We've done
understand.
PIFs, we've done several PIFs over the last couple of years. I'm happy to keep doing those, and at convenience, at people's convenience, come, or we've certainly brought in speakers around this topic, and in the evenings, and we get some turnout for those.
It's
Which
hard.
I totally get. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard for me, and I don't go home from them, because I know if I go home, it'll be hard to turn around and come back. But yes, I'm happy to, if that feels great. I did print off something for you guys. One of the resources that I like a lot, so now you're getting some of my personal bias, is called Learning Scientists. It's a website, but they have blogs, they have webcasts. They make these little posters, and so I printed some things that I thought might be particularly useful for you also as parents. I mean, I know you want to understand this for your own children, but also some of these are things that if you read about them and you're watching someone studying for exams, if you have an upper schooler, because they're next week, or or a lower schooler who's trying to figure out math facts. Some of these you might be able to sort of pull out of your pocket. So there's 6 strategies for effective learning. That's kind of a cover sheet, but then there's a little bit more explanation for each of them in their little infographic type things. And then I also gave you, from the work we're doing with the Science of Learning Institute, 8 different strategies that I think are particularly appropriate for parents. There's certainly many, many more, but I tried to sort of make these about things that you might be able to do at home, or that you might recognize from your kids bringing home, different ways that we're working. So I have these.
Can you put those in like an email so we can put them on a
Happy
link
to.
to?
Yeah, I'll send them to
Is it
Jennifer.
okay if I just scan and?
Yeah, here, I actually have
I'll
That would
scan
be-
one and
I
then
have
I'll
the
include a
master
link in it.
set has the
Yeah, or yeah.
I'll link it.
Thank
You
you.
scan it.
I'll send it to you.
I'll let you
Links
decide.
are wonderful.
But
No,
if you
I'll-
don't
I'll
want
go
paper,
now.
you all can decide to do
Okay,
that. But
wonderful.
this is just
That's great.
sort of master.
Yeah.
I'll take
Master
it.
set.
I'll hold this.
But I will send it to
Here, just pass them around. run out, I'll scan, Robin can post it.
I did 20,
later.
so it's-
I don't know,
I'll
we'll
do it
figure
on
out.
Monday, I'll do it on Monday, I can do it on Monday after,
Yeah.
as a recap.
And we'll
from the
find a
meeting.
place to
So
put it
the-
on our
Yeah.
resource
The
page, or
title of
Facebook
the
even.
title of the book that you recommend is called
Neuro
Teaching. It's
Neuro- one word.
Perfect.
And I have a few copies, actually. The first summer we read it, as I often do with summer reading, I send out to parents and say, we have these if anyone wants to borrow it. And we had a lot of people that first summer borrow the book and then return it. So I do have some copies I'm happy to provide.
Are they in the upper school library?
They are in the library also.
So we'll include that neuroteach, recommend, that we'll talk about that.
Well, Abby's in her sixth grade math class. so
I can just hand it to
sends me
one.
one home, then I can put all the information up on when I send it out.
Thank you very much.
No
That was
problem.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thanks for taking time out of your meeting to talk about all this. Thanks.
I feel better or worse now that I know that I'm already using my.
I know,
brain.
that's why I know. It's kind of exciting and terrifying.
Because as she said, in 6 months, something could change.
I'm
ahead of the
going on a
curve.
10%.
Clearly, I'm gonna say 15. Time just gotta be more.
All right, anybody else have any questions for Greta before she goes? Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
All that you do.
Moving along, parent social debrief.